Ooh, no watchers yet.
I don't even have any music for this morning. We are flying
Wait a
like
minute. You don't have the
so.
soundboard?
Oh, I got the
Oh,
soundboard. Come on, what are you
no.
crazy?
No.
I just don't have a
Of all
special one for this. I didn't set up a
of all
special
the
one for
things.
this particular conversation, but it wouldn't be the same.
Wow, and it's really loud too. That's just what I needed this morning.
A little something to, a little pick me up.
Yeah,
That's the best way to
understatement.
start a conversation about corporate training, I'd say, if there ever
Yes.
was one.
Ooh,
Got to have people cheering about that.
corporate training might be misleading.
Oh,
So,
okay. Well,
so, so, s
typically I say when I just say training in any sort of
yeah.
descriptions or anything like that, people think it's like working out and that kind
Well,
of training. So I always
right.
feel
Good
like I
point.
have to put
Even,
learning or something
yep.
else in front of it.
Even if you do the hashtag, it ends up going to the wrong place as well.
Right.
So I've done that the wrong way too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so sort of corporate learning. I mean, it kind of ties into training in general. And let me set the stage because
Okay.
we kind of started this conversation a while back, and I asked you if it was going to be a good thing to talk about, and you agreed. But let me set the stage. So we're at one of those water parks, those big theme water parks. It's the one in the Poconos Mountains. It's Kalahari. It's a really fun place to go to. We love to take my son. My wife loves to go. And we're waiting in line to get up to the big raft tube things that come down, flying down. Did I lose you on video or did you just
No,
switch
no,
that?
I just switched this a little
Oh,
bit
okay.
there.
And we're sitting in line and I'm looking down on the rest of the area because it's really high. You got to walk up pretty high. And if anybody's familiar with these parks, they usually have like a surf um, tryout or a surf area where the water goes up at a curve really fast and you have to get out there on one of those little boogie boards or like a half surfboard and on your stomach and lay down and kind of jump in there and then you sit like right at the lower level. Well, while you're doing that, there's a guy on a platform in front of you sitting on with his belly on one as well. And he's sitting there for when you get in and he is going to train you on how to do maneuvers on this board. Now, when I say train, it's loosely train, but it's still training. And I've kind of talked about this before that even when you give someone instructions on how to get to McDonald's, you're still kind of training them on what to do. Especially if they're new to the area and they're going to be living in that area, you've now trained them on how to get to this McDonald's. Same thing here. This guy is not technically training you. There's a little board next to where you walk up to get in line that kind of gives you a little tips. But this is his job. He is to try and get you to where you can stand up on this board like it's a surfboard. So he gives you the little tips and tricks. He tilts one way, he tilts the other way. He shows you how to put your arms up and right on your belly. He shows you how to move to your knees, jump up, and then you're on your knees and kind of get stable on your knees. And then he shows you how to jump up actually on the board. So he's training people to do this at this point in time. But his success rate was probably 5%. Like people would get up there, get on the board, and as soon as he would do like the arms out or the get up on your knees, they're spinning and they're off into the gutter and they have to walk and pick up their board and go back upstairs. So he's a trainer in the sense that he's trying to train somebody to do something that they don't know how to do. Most people get on that ride don't really know how to surf or how to ride on a boogie board on water that's flowing.
Right.
But has almost a guaranteed success rate of 5% or less. Like he's doing everything he can. I mean, he's even yelling at them when he can. You can't hear because it's really hard to hear with all the water rushing, but he's yelling at them when he can. But he's also showing them how to do it. He's, doing auditory and visual learner. How about that one?
Oh, you're gonna make some people
I
angry.
know, I know. But it struck me. I was sitting there thinking, man, yeah, there you go, perfect. It's exactly what it is. And it struck me that, man, how do you, these are kids doing this. They get hired for the summer and they're doing this job, so they're probably not putting too much thought into it. But when you think about that whole idea, what do you do in that situation? Do you, do you get discouraged? Do you try and figure out better ways to train people? Do you look at signage and maybe signage needs to be something different? Do they need like pre-work? Do you approach this like corporate learning, like we just talked about? Or is this just something you accept? You accept the fact that 5% or less of the people are going to get what you're training.
Well, there's a lot of different ways we can approach this, and I think there's probably a few people that might end up listening to this going, "Yeah, this is just a dumb thing to even talk about." But I think people need to hold on 1 second before they
Yeah.
go there and start thinking that, and really like, let's use this as an exercise to think through logically some of the things that we talk about on a regular basis with regular corporate training stuff, and how does something like this apply, and are there any topics that really are similar to something like this? Because if you think about it, a lot of what we talk about is choosing what type of training to give to somebody. We always say depends a lot upon like how much money you spend, like the ROI conversation, right? How much money you spend on something almost directly equates to the level of danger or complexity involved. If
Yep.
human life is at risk, then we say yes, spend a couple $1,000,000 on a simulator first, right? And so pilots, right, Gav, all
Yep.
sorts of
Yep.
simulation training, right? And so we have these conversations all the time, and that makes a lot of sense. And they say surgeons, right, have them use simulations first, and if you have to spend $1,000,000 on a simulator first, it's worth it because it's such that a high level
Yeah.
of danger and whatnot
Like
involved. And I
like
would
you
argue.
need 99% completion on that type of training when you get done with
Exactly.
it.
Yeah, right. There needs to be some seriousness. Now, if we apply that same sort of thinking, you could break your neck on this thing.
You could.
Right.
I mean,
And
the
so, and
there's
yet
some
we don't
acceptance
say,
for
hey,
this.
spend 200 hours in a simulator before we're going to allow you to get on this thing. We just say, hey, here's how you do it. Here's 5 minutes of quick instruction. Go have
Yeah.
at it.
And so, and it's technically on the job training. I mean, because once you're out there, there's nowhere to go. It's not like you can step back and say, okay, well, tell me about this first.
Yeah.
You're right, though. That's a really good point that you brought up. Safety and kind of leans back to what people need to get out of it. And again, we are looking at something where people are just out having fun. They're doing a fun water park thing, and to get wet is kind of the idea. But you're right, though. When you translate that over,
Yep.
what can we learn from this that translates over into that other field? Is there inherent risk, or is there risk that everyone knows? Is there a risk that's really super high? What's the big risk here? And like you said, yes, you can break your neck on something like this, but you know, do we need to give them more warning? Do we need to give them more training ahead of time?
Well, I think that's so that I'm certain that gets handled in the little disclosure agreement they probably make you sign before you get in line to ride the thing, right? It's
Yep.
it's like I waive all of my rights to sue you when I fall and break my leg.
Yeah, exactly.
But we don't offer that in regular corporate training. So anyway, so there's that piece of it that I kind of got to thinking about, and then there's just the other piece of, okay, this is a fun endeavor, and so therefore you might say, this is at their own risk. We're not paying them to do it, right? So this is
Right.
this is a strictly voluntary act, but yet at the same time, so from a marketing perspective, you want people to enjoy themselves and you want them to come back. And so there's a lot of ways you could equate that to the type of work that we do too, right? If you want somebody
Yes.
to come back and use your software, for example, you want them to
Yes.
have an enjoyable experience. You want them to have a good time doing it, whether they fail immediately or not. You want them to be able to say, hey, I almost got it. I'm willing to come back and give it another try.
And that's one of the points I wanted to talk about when you're talking about giving something away. I mean, technically, you're not giving away because when you pay to get into this park, you're paying for everything.
Right.
So a small amount of that goes to that. But I mean, it's
No such
minuscule.
thing
It
as a
isn't
free lunch.
exactly. But I think that was one of the things that I really wanted to talk about in detail was what are they getting out of this? What are both sides? What are the learner and what are the trainer getting out of this? Well, the trainer's getting paid, whatever those kids get paid. So they have no vested interest in that person. They just, they're not, well, they're probably, I don't know. That's a good question. I'd love to find out if they're actually taught to try and get people to come back in for that. I mean, that they might be part of the marketing, but for the marketing's mostly in the signs and watching a line of people get up in there.
Right.
But so the trainer, I don't think gets anything out of it. I don't think he gets any satisfaction. I don't think he gets any extra, he doesn't get any extra pay for it. If people, complete it, he doesn't get any extra pay. The learner is getting satisfaction. But if we're going to judge this training by the satisfaction, nobody's getting any satisfaction out of this training.
Unless you're already a pro, right? Unless you already
Right.
know how to surf, then probably getting onto one of these things probably is relatively easy. It probably takes 2 or 3 times to get used to the different type of feeling, the size of the
Yeah.
board, all that kind of stuff. It probably takes a little bit of practice and going through it, but in general, if you've got some skills already, maybe you're a skateboarder or maybe you've already
Yeah.
ridden real waves,
Yeah.
in the ocean and whatnot, right? So there's that aspect of it too, and I guess we could equate something like that to prior knowledge, right? We always talk about understanding your audience, the level of success that somebody's going to have. A lot depends upon their level of prior knowledge that they can apply to the task that
True.
you're trying to train them on. So that's one.
So my next turn I mean, we've kind of looked at this use case as an idea, and I want to translate that over into what you started with corporate learning, though.
Mhm.
I want to look at the fact that if you took this model and went into corporate learning, I mean, the obvious thing is you're going to lose your job. If you're creating training and you're putting training out to people that are on a floor and they are failing 95% of the time with this training, then you're going to lose your job. There's nothing's going to happen good come out of that when
Yeah.
you do that. Translate that over into corporate training. But it also, you mentioned about the danger of what the job is, but also look at how quickly you have to train people. Does that affect the acceptance rate of the training? So if somebody is, I mean, military is a good one because if we were in a wartime situation and you needed to get soldiers out, you would have a very, very short time to train someone to do the job that they needed to do if you had to ship them out. I'm trying to think of another good example of a actual work situation where you would need to train somebody almost while they're doing it or quickly so you could get them up to speed almost immediately. And I think that's where this use case might fit in, as to where the failure rate is almost acceptable to be less than like 99 or 95 or 90, that you might have to give them 2 or 3 times. They might have to get the feel of it, come back and take the training again, and then see if they can pass it. So do you got any ideas on that or thoughts on that?
Yeah, and it was interesting because that's kind of the first pitch you gave me in having this conversation, right? Was how does all of that failure rate, how can somebody be doing some training or instruction and fail, because the majority of these people are going to fail at their attempt, and how can that be okay? And again, like if somebody was just dialing in and listening to us talk about this, they're immediately going to be thinking, well, it's just stupid. It's just surfing. It's no big deal. And if the guy wasn't there to say anything, people would still want to give it a shot, and they would probably teach each other in line. They'd be like, okay, when you get out there, do this, do that. And they're probably doing that anyways, right? So there's probably some community learning going on in line as people are watching each other. So there's that aspect of it too. But in general, I mean, I'm kind of all over the place in this thinking, but I just want people that might be listening to the recording of this later to kind of just listen and think to yourself, how does this apply? Because on the surface, this is kind of silly for us to have this conversation. But to dig into these different elements, I think is kind of fun and interesting. And I think it helps us loosen our creative thoughts a little bit, right? And to think differently about maybe some of the work that we do. So if the failure rate is an issue, in this case, obviously it's not, because how are we defining failure? I think that's the part that as properly trained instructional designers, we should probably figure that piece out first.
That's what I was going to get. Yeah, I was going to get to that at some point too.
Yeah, if Sam Rogers would hear that was here, he'd be dropping the hammer on us for that one. What? How are we going to measure this dang thing right now? And what is being measured? It can't possibly be the success or failure of being able to do the task. What they're measuring is, even though you failed, did you learn a little bit or just enough to want to come back and try again and modify your approach? Or did it hurt so bad that you're like, F it.
So,
I am not coming back, because that hurt way too bad when I hit the deck. That, like, my hips all bruised, and I'm like, oh, this is not good.
It's funny you mentioned that. So we're in this industry, we're familiar with iterative design. So is there such a thing as iterative learning?
Yeah, absolutely. We learned that from the gaming industry, right?
I guess, but where does it apply? Where does something like that apply? Does it apply on what I talked about a few seconds ago, where you have to have somebody trained up immediately? They got to learn something. So you give them small parts, see if they pass. Give them small parts, see if they pass. Give them small part, they fail. Okay, bump back to the next small part. Is that where that fits in?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, obviously, I'm going to go ahead and say this. I told myself I wasn't going to say this at all in this, but I'm going to say it depends.
It does depend. No, it does. 100%.
I mean, it's like, if you weave all of these little things that we've already started talking about, and there's more, but if you weave them all together, they all create this picture of a pretty common training experience of, we can only teach people so much before we have to put them out onto the floor, onto the job, and then they have to start doing the tasks. And, we may not be able to get them to 100% proficiency, but we have to kind of figure out what is the acceptable level of proficiency to allow them then to attempt the task for real. And if they fail at it, is there some support available, right? Is there a colleague or a coworker right by that can help out, right? That kind of thing. I mean, in this case, with the person instructing the wave thing, it's probably just one person doing it. But to kind of pull all this together into a real work environment, then you have to look at that outcome, right? And how are we measuring it, and how safe are we at cutting that person loose onto the floor? Let's pretend it's retail, right? I mean, right? I mean, the Christmas season's right around the corner, right? There's malls, shopping malls, stores are already ramping up for Christmas, and they are the masters of, let's hire a crap ton of people and keep the ones that are good. And
seasonal work,
the seasonal work, right? And then let the people that weed out, let them fall out. So we'll overhire, just so we have a lot
more bodies.
Yep, we have people there, right? Yeah. And worst case scenario, if the person can't run the register, we put them in the back and make them stock things. If they are not good at counting the things in the back or whatever, maybe we make them a greeter. Maybe they're super cheery, and we just stand them at the door and we just say, just be happy and make sure people are happy when they walk in the store or whatever,
Ooh, you're going to open up another can of worms, and I want to set this aside because I have one more thing to say about this.
Oh, okay.
You just brought up a really good thought of, oh man, I don't even know if I want to say this out loud. So, is training used to weed people out? Did you just say that a second ago?
Academic universities have been doing it for eons.
I mean, it's not wrong, but taking that point of view really skews it to a very dark area.
Well, you just know that there's a certain level of attrition, right? You know And at least, especially in some, especially in retail, right? There's a certain
Yeah.
level of expected attrition, and so you play it as a numbers game, right? You play the numbers. If I recruit X number of people, I hire a
Yeah.
certain percentage of those people. I'm certain that a certain percentage of them, after a week or two, are going to say, this isn't for me.
Yep.
I'm out.
Right. Or
You
vice
know,
versa.
yeah.
You're not for us. No, I
Yeah,
agree. Because in corporate training, I mean, I actually worked that in a very large corporate entity for a long time. And I went through their training initially when I got in on the ground floor at this company. And it was that we had 12 people in our class, and there was another 12 waiting to get in behind us. And two of those people just, they couldn't make it. They tried training them. They didn't grasp the concepts. They didn't understand them. One of them made it out to the floor before they figured this out, but one of them in the classroom was like, the teacher just had to tell them, you're not cut out for this. And sometimes training does weed out people, and it sounds harsh, but it's true. You're right. It's
yeah,
and then it's not. Then you're not looking at the percentage of how much the trainer is getting people trained up. Then you're looking at the percentage as, well, maybe this person just couldn't be trained up at all. And we've had that classic discussion of, is it the trainer's fault or is it the person's fault? Because you're holding the trainer responsible for two people failing, but those two people just might not be a fit for that job, period. Then where's the crossover?
right. Well, and then of course, and then that's where our job, or the work that we do, starts to tie in and connect with other jobs and other responsibilities.
Yep.
So right, so we might say, recruiting's doing a bad job of getting us the right kind of people into this role. Right? We can only train a certain type of person that's predisposed to doing this type of job or whatever, right? And if
Yep.
recruiting and HR aren't doing their job, then there's no amount of training that can help overcome that. In some situations, I'm obviously, everybody that's freaking out right now. This is an exceptionally hypothetical, generalized conversation beyond all things. So yeah, if you're feeling a little bit attacked or something right now, I'm sorry, don't. This is just a fun conversation to
It
try
is.
to. It's an exercise in thinking.
Well, and I will tie into that. That's actually the next thing I wanted to talk about. And I think that all of us as trainers, all the way, again, kind of jump back to what I said, whether you're training somebody to find the McDonald's around the corner, or whether you're in a corporate environment training 30 people to, be managers in 10 departments in different parts of the country, you're still a trainer. You still have tactics. You still have ways you like to train, ways you want to train, ways that work. Tried and true ways that you've built over the 10-year period of training and getting out there and doing that. And I did that. I did classroom training. I did virtual instructor led training. I created training modules, asynchronous training. I've done the whole gamut of it. But I think that what I mostly took from this experience is pay attention to those things. When you see something out there, try and see how that fits in with your thinking or with your training or with training you've ever been in. I can't be the only one that looked down there and saw that as a training, a small microcosm of what training is. Somebody else
Sadly, I think
has.
a lot of us look at everything and go, "That's something I can use." Oh, what's the training learning? What's the instructional design in that?
But I think that's one of the things I wanted to take away from this. And if anybody's listening to this and later on to take away from that is don't get set into what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you're training in a classroom and you're doing that classroom training over and over and over again, and you feel like you're in a groove, start looking out at other things. Change your room up. Take a class online just for fun, just so you can see how it's taught differently. The moving from classroom to virtual instructor led training, which is a really hot button right now because that's what a lot of
Yeah.
people had to do. People either had to fly or fall at that point. You really found out how good you are at training or adapting to a different type of training when basically everything said, you're now not in a classroom. You're going to sit in front of people on a computer, to 15 people on a computer, and engage them.
Yeah, that's a fantastic connection to all of this. I hadn't even thought
Yeah.
of that angle, right? All of the people that had to learn on the fly. It actually does kind of apply into something I was thinking. We're talking about the trainer being the teacher or the instructor, and then the person on the board on the wave being the learner. But
Yep.
we're so basically what you're talking about, and where I was going to go with it next was flipping it around. That instructor is actually also in a learning moment. That instructor is
True.
probably watching people on that wave, and after watching dozens or hundreds of people do it, I'll bet he learns tips and tricks in watching the different body types. You know, what's your center of gravity? Okay, you need to bend your knees a little bit more. Okay, you shouldn't even be here.
Yes.
Get out of line. You're going to hurt yourself, right? You know,
Yes. You're 62 years old. This is a bad place for you.
right?
No, that's a really good point.
But
And not
yeah,
only that, but you also get to, um, you get to it almost becomes automatic. Like you said, if you're thinking, hey, this person looks like they're going to need to get up on their knees a little bit more, it's almost a subconscious thing for him. If he's watched 200 people a day do it,
right.
he's like,
You
bam,
can't
I know
help but
what
learn.
I
Yeah.
know where to go. Now. Okay, yeah, and I'm going to give you the other side of it. And my wife, God bless her, she's just great. So what she said is, what if he's trying to get them to fail? I'm like, what?
Ooh, there's a good twist on the conversation. Okay,
I'm
let's
like,
go there.
what? And she said, well, it looks like he's trying to have them do tricks that are going to be really hard to do. Like he does one where he has them spin the board underneath them. And I'm like, I never thought of it that way. Maybe, maybe his whole point is to get them out of line so the next person can come in and shove more people through the line. And I'm like, that's like anti-training at that point.
But, she's probably quite uh, intuitive in noticing that. I wonder if they are trained to get the line moving. Because what if you do get somebody that's really good?
Yeah.
How long is there a timer? Do they say,
Nope.
do they start? No, nothing else. So you have to wait until the person that can actually stand up, you have to wait until they fall or until they say, okay, I'm tired, I'm done, I'm going to drop out.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Maybe, she's onto something.
but it made me think. It did. It made me. And again, we're taking a really small thing and turning it into something that fits what we do. And when she said that, it changed my whole perspective about how you do things and how
Yeah.
trainers do things.
Well,
And
again,
then
but
it
it's
made
the
me think,
goal, right? Again, it's
right,
back to understanding what's the terminal objective, what's the goal here.
right. But it also brought me to that in connecting that last point I was just talking about people being in a room and getting in a rut and looking at other things. Some trainers are accidentally doing that. They're accidentally training people out of a position or accidentally not giving the people people what they need to actually go out on the floor and do their job the right way. And because they're so set in those ways, they don't realize it. And, okay, test is a good way of checking someone's knowledge, but a test is also can be luck. It could be somebody just guessing the right answers. So if everybody's getting 95% on their quizzes and they're like, okay, that's good enough for us, then we're back to that. What we just said, what are we trying to get out of it? What are we trying to get out of this training? What does that learner need to get out of this training?
Yeah.
And
What? Yeah. I mean, but then it also comes down to that instructor. You're right. Them needing to learn how to do something different and maybe shift things
right.
up. Because if you think about it, let's say you get to a point where you just, a particular way works. All right.
Mhm.
That's great. It works and you keep doing
Yep.
it. But at a certain level, that instructor's going to get bored.
Yes.
Right.
Good point.
And
And
then they're not going to want to do it anymore. So the only reason why I kind of went there was because that's how I get bored really fast. Like as soon as I figure something out and I've written the instructions for it, that's it. I'm done. I don't want to be the maintenance guy. I don't want to be the guy that just has to do it over and over and over and over again. I like building it, passing it off, and let somebody else maintain it, and go
Yeah.
on and do it. And I was even that way doing classroom stuff. So I'm one of those types of instructors that has no problem going, hey, let's shake it up. Let's do something
Yeah.
totally different in this particular class. Whether it bombs or not, it's a learning moment. But it's just, I don't know. I think it's that adrenaline rush.
Well, no, but it also brings another good point of that trainer's level of drive. What drives them to do this? If you're telling them you have to teach it this way and this is the only way you can teach it, what's their drive to get people to learn it the right way? What's this kid's drive to get people to stand up? Well, he's going to be there for 3 hours regardless, teaching people how to do this. If he's not getting paid very well, he's probably going to be like my wife said, and just try and get people off and move them as quickly as he can because it's probably more fun for him to do.
I was just gonna say, he sees somebody in line that's being a real jerk. He's gonna be like, "Hey, you know what you should do, dude? You look really good at this. You should try it like this."
Oh, we're such bad people. But it brings up that point too. If you get, it's also materials. You're looking at materials. If they have the right materials to do this, to teach this job, then they're going to be excited about it. But if you hand somebody a binder with 250 pages and tell them they have to go page by page and tell people what's on the slides, I'm not going to be excited about that. I'm going to be out of that in a heartbeat. Are you telling me that I can't adapt it to my style? I can't, have a whiteboard instead of this, what's my incentive now as an instructor to want to pass this knowledge on to people?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so do we take that back to the person training on the fake wave? Do they need that kind of motivation to do that, or is there that kind of motivation? I mean, does that person? So yeah, I think it's a personality type thing at that point. I think we've come across a couple things, and my mind went into some really weird places, and I won't even go there. But I'm thinking to myself, the type of person that would get this kind of gig and do this kind of job might just be that odd, maybe not odd, maybe it's a bad word. That's a negative connotivity. I think interesting might be a better word to it. An interesting personality that is going to be trying to make their job as fun as possible, because they don't just want to stand there and go next.
Yeah.
Next.
Good point.
Right. So I'm thinking that type of person is going to be, I mean, maybe they want to get people off and maybe they want to rotate people through the line, but maybe it's a girl teaching and she sees a hot guy in line. Is she going to want him to get off the wave as soon as possible? Maybe not, right?
Wow. Yeah, you did go to weird places. I'm just gonna no, but well, I mean,
come on. I mean, if we're going to be talking about something hypothetical,
I think that's one of the things that lacks in our field is talking about the nuances like this. When you talk about things like that, when you talk about,
it's a holistic way of thinking about what we do, right? That maybe we don't.
But it's the classic teacher's pet idea. If you think about it, when kids are in classrooms and one kid tends to answer the questions more often, gets called on more often, is more, outgoing and more willing to speak, that kind of ties into that. And that's another hurdle we have to overcome when we're training people, especially if you're training a large room of 15 to 25 to 30 people and you've got one person that's standing out. If you cater to that, you're going to lose those other people in the room, or they're going to lose some of the, the points that you're trying to hit or the training that you're trying to do. So you're not too far off the mark with that whole idea. I hadn't really thought about that, but that's a great tangent to go on.
So here's another piece we could tie into this, right? We haven't talked about gamification yet. What if there was some sort of like each individual, to make their job more fun, they could set a goal. They look at all the people in line and go, okay, I'm going to get at least half of this line to stand up for like to at least be up on their feet for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And they set a goal for themselves, right? And so you're kind of gamifying it. You're quantifying some aspect of your abilities, and so now you're starting to think, okay, how this person's probably going to be able to get up this way. This other person's okay. I'm gonna, they look like they already know how to do this, so maybe I don't need to give them as much instruction or whatever, and I'm just going to kind of see how it goes. Or maybe there's some other, quantification that they're doing mentally in their own head. But the company could also do something like that, right? And have some way of calculating time on task, right? Time on board, right? And there's a point board in the back for all of the instructors, because I'm sure the shifts aren't that long. Right. And so maybe as the shifts rotate and everything, they see, ooh, hey, this person was able to get X number of people up on their feet for a certain period of time. Can you beat it?
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about putting a measurement on something like that. I mean,
Gamification,
wow.
baby.
Well, no, but it's kind of both. It's gamification and getting people to kind of compete against each other, but you're also having the trainers compete against each other.
Yeah.
Because
for sure.
I mean, if you think about it, wow, this is okay. We're going really deep here. Technically,
well, not really, but okay.
Technically, I could be trained on the same thing by two different people in the same day.
Yes.
Because I could get on that ride in the morning, get a guy that doesn't know what he's doing, and then I could get the same ride in the afternoon, get a guy that really is slick at it, and
let's not be sexist about this. There could be girls instructing
true.
too, right?
No, that's true. There were girls doing it as well.
All right.
But regardless, I could be trained by two different people on the same job, and maybe get one way or the like you said though. But it's nice to kind of have a measurement to say, well, this person's the one you want to go up there. So like his line could be a lot longer because he's getting people trained to do it. And then if you look at it from a corporate point of view, maybe that's the bad guy. You don't want him up there because he's making the lines really long.
So making it more fun for himself. And what could they do? Like, is there so let's look at this from let's really instructional design the heck out of this, right? Is there, if we were to go in and coach them, let's say they hired a bunch of instructional designers. I have no clue why they would, but let's just say they're like, you know what? This is an instructional design problem. Let's get some instructional designers to help us get people better at this, right?
Yes.
What would we do, right? And the first thing I was thinking of, well, there's got to be some pre-work, right? Maybe there's
exactly
maybe there's a video that they watch, right, with a little bit of instruction.
Okay, let's stick with pre-work. I'll give you my idea.
That's what
these ideas. This came up. This has been mulling in my head for almost a month now. So
I know. I could tell you needed to get it out. So I'm glad we're doing
this. There's a stand with two bars that come up that you can put your hands on, and then you can step onto a plate that is held by springy boards.
That's what I was just going to recommend.
So you get on that, and you work on your balance that way before you actually get in line. So that's one of the pre-works.
So there is pre-work.
Excellent. I think the video is a good idea too. I think that the showing the movements to them before they get out there to have a trainer show them that would actually probably help, because when you get out there on the water and he goes up on his knees and you're like, there's no way I could do this. What the hell? And I think seeing it before would help a lot.
Yeah.
But I think the pre-work of being able to just see what your balance is would also help a lot. Being able to step up on something that would see your balance. So what's the next step?
Well, then then you're doing the task, right? So I don't think it has to go too much further than that, right? There's the visual aspect of it. The visual might be accompanied by some audio. Then there's the actual practice on the simulator, right? If it's on the spring, you're kind of simulating it. Then you do the task. Then there's a review section at the end. Like when you're done, maybe the instructor naturally says, "Hey, you know what? Here's what I saw you do. Next time you get up there, try doing this instead." And then there's some reflection, and then you go through the cycle again.
I got a mid section came to mind while I was thinking.
Okay.
a slower side and a faster side.
Oh, there you go.
A beginner side, an intermediate side, or a beginner side and an advanced side.
Is there a
So you
big?
actually get
Can they
yeah,
do
yeah.
that
So I
though?
said
Can they?
I don't know if they can. I mean, I assume the jets would, you could probably shoot the jets out stronger on one side than you could on the other, and have them start on that basic side,
But
and
if the
then when they come
jets
back the
aren't, but
next
if
time,
I would assume that the jets have to be going at least a minimum speed in
right?
order for it
Yeah,
to
to
even
keep you up.
function.
Right. But so then you might have to actually increase on the advanced side a little bit to bring down the other side.
Okay.
Um, I mean, if you've ever skated or surfed, it does actually work better the faster the wave is going. But
Yeah.
again, you got to have more talent and
But
more
maybe so.
balance
Maybe
skills.
but maybe it's also the shape of because there
Yep.
is like that blue shape that the water is
Yep.
shooting over, right? And so
Yep.
maybe that shape that they carve or create that the
Is
water is
different.
going over, yes, is lower. It's not quite as steep in the beginner one, but
That
then in
would be
the more
better.
advanced one, it's got a steeper angle to it. Maybe that's part of it too.
Well, yeah. So now we've got a beginner side where you can learn. And then when you're done with that beginner side, you actually get back in line before you take the advanced side. So you can absorb what you learned. You can take back and talk it through with other people in line. Look at
Yep.
your instructions again. Even stand on the simulator again just to see how it feels a little bit different. Maybe let your hands go for a second and see, if you can do it. So it's almost like we said, iterative training. We're giving them a slower learn and then a quicker learn.
Do we give them a
Um,
certificate at the end of the beginning?
Not necessarily a certificate, but you mentioned something earlier, which I thought, man, that's a great idea. Behind the trainer should be a clock, and that clock should give you times on how long you're on your knees,
Ah, there you go. Yeah. Okay.
how long you're standing, to give you some feedback on how well you're actually doing in it.
Or it's just a
And then
total time, whether it's knees.
it could be.
How long before you just bite it?
Good point. Yeah. Well, it could be a split time. It could be a total time, and then a split time for when you stand up. So stand up is the accomplishment. You get the accomplishment time starting there, and if you get over if you get over a minute of full standing time, we give you your free board. You get your own board. It's a custom board where when you get back in line, you carry your board with you, and you get to use your custom board. That's your certificate.
That's probably pricey for the business too.
Well,
Handing
okay,
out boards.
so let me tell you that in the entire time I watched we waited in line almost 20 minutes to get on this ride. Zero people got up, even up to their knees, let alone up on their feet. And I can tell you that every single time I walked by, no one was up on their feet in that entire ride at any point in time.
So
So
people were just having a good time being on their bellies and just kind of
yeah,
tipping and steering
floating,
and
trying to spin, and some of them got up on their knees, and then they could ride for a little bit on their knees. But as soon as they would go to the feet, it was the wipeout. I could probably tell you they would maybe give away one board every other day at that rate of what they were doing.
yeah.
But
And they're such
but
unique boards just for that particular machine. It's not like they're going to
right.
take that board and be able to use it out on real waves.
Right. And you could actually make it look like a certificate, put a little symbol, the little gold stamp on
It's
the bottom
marketing,
of
yeah,
it. And
right?
but no, so okay, so
People go
we
and
had
just
pre-work.
mount it on their wall because it's not like they could ever use it again
Yeah.
unless they go back to that particular wave place.
We're like marketing geniuses. We need to do this. So we got pre-work. We have a simulator. We have iterative learning where you take and retake. We have feedback.
Levels. We have scaffolding
Yeah, yeah. We have feedback.
and feedback.
But
Social.
we don't have ROI at this point. That's the only thing we don't.
Well, that's the gamification, right? What's the return on investment is joy. Joy can be an ROI, right?
I guess.
Minimizing
But hold on.
pain.
This is well, that's a good one. But this is going to bring up a really real quick conversation as well, though. So, who's the ROI for? You're talking about return for investment. You're talking about return on investment for the company most of the time. You and I automatically went to the learner's ROI.
Yeah.
We didn't even think about
Well,
the
okay, so the
company.
ROI for the company is nobody sued us today. It's
Yeah.
it's
I
always
guess that's
legal.
joy for them too,
It's
right?
yeah, it's compliance. nobody Nobody broke their legs. We didn't have to call if it's on like a cruise ship or something. No, we didn't have to call
Yeah.
the medic helicopter to come in and helicopter somebody off with a fractured hip or anything like that. So that's a
Yeah.
win for us.
That's exactly where I wanted to go with it, with kind of to tie this up, was to figure out, how we as instructional designers would actually go out and make that better, because I want to. And that's kind of goes back to what I said about looking at seeing things in the real world and kind of relating them back to yourself and getting something from them, is that's what I immediately wanted to do. I immediately wanted to go in there and say, maybe they need a board up front. And I was thinking small. We hashed it out a lot better here. But I
Yeah.
was thinking, maybe they just need a board saying these are the steps you're going to do when you get out on that board. Be prepared to do this next and be prepared to do this. At least that would give them something, because there's nothing out there for them. But the exercise of actually what I would do, I think, is what spurred my wife to say, maybe he doesn't want to do that. Maybe he wants to get people off. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably the good point.
It's such a great point, such a fantastic observation on her part. I just wonder too, real quick, before we wrap it up here,
Yeah.
how many people failed at even just being on their belly?
Honestly, people would. So it's a hill. I mean, you got that picture. You got the picture. You can bring back up
Yeah.
again. You still have it up.
Yep.
So it's a hill, and basically what you do is you walk in from the side, and you can't see it too much, but up to her, be her right, off screen to the left. There's an area where you stand. Actually, it's on the right. That you can see where the people are lining up over there, and you actually have to walk and put your board in on your belly at the top, and then kind of dip in a little bit. Yeah, and then kind of dip in a little bit. So what happens at that point for most people is they either dip the board too far forward and it catches the wave and kicks them off, or they dip it too far back and then they go too far down and then they lose. They start waving side to side and it just flips them around in a circle. So yeah, and now him starting her like that, like they just showed, would be a nice tip as well, because to answer your question, most people that got down on the board and jumped in were off like immediately. I'd say he probably got to train 3 out of every 5 people at that point. Most of the people just fell off before they even got down to the trainer at that point. So the pre-work it threw them off.
It didn't function for them, right?
They pre-tested and that told that they needed to go back to the remedial training.
Right. When you put your hands on the edge of that board, do your knuckles touch the bottom of or is it deep enough where you don't actually hit the ground?
It's deep enough to where you don't actually hit the ground.
Okay.
But that's one of the things that I realized as I was watching this whole process of people doing it, is putting your hands down actually creates enough drag on one side or the other to flip you around. So if you actually if you lay down on it and put your hands down on it and kind of ride down into that circle first and then put your hands around it, it gives you a better balance on it. And I probably thought about this way too much in detail while I was standing there, but
You've
I
got
always
the
try to
physics
analyze
of
all this.
the whole body
I do.
movements going through your head. You've animated it now with the whole thing. And
I do. Well, it's just a great exercise of thinking, and I wanted to kind of apply it to what we do as learning and development professionals in this industry. And it was a great conversation. I think I got a lot out of it. So.
Yeah, no, this is great. And you know what I think I want to do? I think this is good. There's got to be other, interesting, semi-related, but maybe not so much related, where we could do this again. And
Yeah, I agree.
when we see this kind of stuff, and you can, because I think this reminds me of, and not to drag this out too much longer, but this reminds me of the value of doing like the Lego exercise that Kevin Thorne puts people through
100%.
to help you think, and using your hands to build a representation of what it is that you're trying to think about. It's weird, and so many people bash on it. There were some really negative Twitter conversations a year or so
it's
back.
amazing.
right? But when I was a mild skeptic too before I went through it. And I was really, really amazed at going through an exercise like this and just stretching your thinking, just taking all the walls down and all of the things that we know and just freely thinking and coming up with brainstorming crazy ideas like what we did and different things that might be going through somebody's head and how things might be working from both the learner's side, the instructor's side, the task, being able to go through all of that for lots of different things, I think is a fantastic exercise to go through. So let's do this again.
Okay.
And if we save this as a recording and we push it out to Twitter or whatever, and other people are watching this, be sure to jump into the Learn Train and give us some ideas. Jump into the comments section or whatever, and tell us what other weird things that you have seen that seem instructional, might be related to what we do, and we can have a conversation about it.
I would love to dissect some ideas, so definitely throw them in, and I'll link out to this as well on my Twitter account because I would love to dissect things like that. And again, it feels like it's fun, but it's actually making me think about things and making me kind of even step back and look at what I do. I do a lot of training online now as compared to what I used to do in the classrooms. It even makes me take a second perspective of, just the small fact of ROI. I always consider it what the company is getting out of it. You immediately went to the learner, and I'm like, wow, I hadn't really thought of return on investment being a learner thing as well when they're paying for training like that. So, yeah, thanks. I appreciate it.
My
I'd love
pleasure.
to get some more.
A lot of angles to have these conversations with it. So hopefully we'll get some other people interested and excited about it. And hopefully too many people didn't just roll their eyes at the beginning, first 5 minutes and go, this is silly. Why are they talking about that?
I see Q's in the room, so I know he's probably got some ideas to throw at us. So.
I know he's got a lot of ideas. He's an out-of-the-box thinker.
Yes. Well, thanks, Brent. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, oh yeah, my pleasure, man. Always fun to chat with you. Hey, we're not even going to pitch the music podcast?
We can. Music Musing is a podcast that you can pick up pretty much anywhere at this point. We're actually doing YouTube now, so if you search Music Musing, you can find it on YouTube pretty easily. Talk about music, talk with people about their music histories, like where they started from music, but also doing a covers idea of rock covers of I think we've decided on anything pre-80s at this point, pre-80s songs that we're
metal
be
covers.
Looking at metal covers, right? Metal covers.
We have expanded it, but the initial push is to find as many metal covers of like early pop songs and things like that as possible. But if we do find other interesting versions and renditions, we talk about those as well. And we do. Boy, do we ever. There's some good stuff out there.
Music Musing, check it out on YouTube or anywhere you find podcasts.
All right, thanks, sounds good. Perfect pitch. All right.
Yeah.
Talk to you later, buddy. Where's my end of the podcast button?
I don't know where the end of the podcast is, but I'm
there
out.
It is. All right. Adios, everybody.
I'll catch you later, man.
Yeah.